Good morning, children. Today I'm going to start with a new chapter from your reader book, First Flight. Chapter number 2, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. Here in this chapter, you will come to know that how Nelson Mandela, he became the first black president of South Africa. You know that apartheid is the oppressive policy that is based on racial discrimination. And South Africa faced the evil effects of this inhuman practice till 10th May 1994. And Mandela, he called 10th May, that lovely autumn day, as this day saw the fall of a system of governance based on race and creed. Just as the trees shed their old and worn out leaves in autumn, so were the oppressive policies practiced in South Africa shed, making room for a new and fresh, democratic, non-racial government. This chapter is Nelson Mandela's autobiography. And he has mentioned that the extraordinary disasters that Mandela talks of in his inaugural presidential speech is the effect of the long drawn apartheid policy practiced by the whites in South Africa. In this chapter, you will come to know that how Nelson Mandela became the first black president of South Africa. It is about the author Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. He was born in 1918 and died in 2013. He is one of the greatest political leaders of our time. He was a South African revolutionary political leader and philanthropist who fought for the rights of his people and raised voice against the practice of apartheid or racial discrimination in South Africa. He served as the first black president of South Africa from 1994 to 1999. He emerged as an international hero whose lifelong dedication to the fight against racial oppression in South Africa won him the Nobel Peace Prize in 1993. Here is the introduction of the chapter, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. The extract, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom, is taken from the autobiography of this great man. It is a touching account of the horrible atrocities and oppression inflicted by the heartless white rulers on the innocent black natives in South Africa. The regime adopted a policy called apartheid that created one of the harshest systems of racial discrimination in the world. Mandela shares a few of his bitter experiences during his struggle against apartheid, along with the overwhelming emotions he experienced when a democratic era was finally ushered in after years of struggle. Children, is the theme of the story. The chapter explores the idea of struggle, setback, renewed hopes, and ultimate triumph of truth. Its theme is summed up in the last sentence of the extract. The oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity. Nelson Mandela shares his experiences to convey the thought that freedom is an individual's birthright. Oppression is condemnable when it is inflicted as well as when it is tolerated. People all over the world, the equal and deserve respect, irrespective of their caste, creed, or skin color. So those who look down upon their fellow beings or mistreat them behave against the laws of nature. The natural tendency of human beings is to love and not to hate. This flame of love can never be extinguished. Therefore, the chains of hatred that bind the oppressor and the chains that deprive anyone of his rights must be broken. Here is a summary of the chapter, Nelson Mandela, Long Walk to Freedom. This chapter is an extract from Nelson Mandela's autobiography and takes the reader back to May 10th, 1994, when Mandela was sworn in as the first black president of democratic South Africa. This historic day was clear and bright, with dignitaries from all over the world coming over gradually to felicitate him. The inauguration ceremony of the installation of South Africa's first democratic, non racial government was to be held in a sandstone amphitheatre in Pretoria. This building had been the seat of white supremacy for decades, but on this day it was thronged by people of varied colors and races from different nations. Mandela was accompanied by his daughter Zenani, and his swearing in was preceded by that of Mr. de Klerk as the second deputy president and Mr. Thabo Mbeki as the first deputy president. Nelson Mandela pledged to obey and uphold the constitution of his republic. He also swore to devote himself to the well being of his republic and its people. In his inaugural speech, Mandela equated the centuries old misrule of the whites to an extraordinary human disaster. He promised to bring up a society of which all humanity would be proud. He expressed a sense of pride over the fact that the blacks, who had been considered as outlaws till then, were host to so many nations of the world. He expressed his gratitude to all the dignitaries from having participated in this common victory for justice, peace, and human dignity. He further added that they had achieved political emancipation and were now taking the pledge to free all their people from the shackles of poverty, suffering, deprivation, gender, and other types of discrimination. He closed his address with the wish that freedom reigns and Africa be blessed by God. An impressive display of South African jets, helicopters, and troop carriers added to the spectrum of the inaugural ceremony. Mandela termed it as an exhibition of military loyalty to the newly formed democratic government. When saluted by the military generals, Mandela pointed out the shift in their attitude. These decorated officers, who had just saluted him as the new president and pledged loyalty to his government, would have arrested him not many years ago. The grand ceremony came to a close with the Impala jets leaving a trail of the bright colors that formed the new South African flag. On that symbolic day, two national anthems were played. The whites sang Nkosi Sikelel Africa and the blacks Die Stem. Mandela knew that although the two groups had once despised each other's anthem, they would soon memorize both. Mandela also recalled the historical events that had marked the growth of apartheid in South Africa. The Boer War was the first decade of the 20th century had witnessed the spreading of the system of racism and dominance of the blacks by the whites. However, in the last decade of the century, all this had been overturned and the South Africans enjoyed equal rights and freedom irrespective of the color of their skin. Mandela also recognized the sacrifices made by thousands of people before him who had suffered hardships because they were patriots. He felt sorry that they could not witness the fruits borne due to the hardships undergone by them. Mandela particularly criticized the policy of apartheid, which had left a deep and lasting wound on his country and its people. He admitted that it would take ages to recover from this, but also observed that decades of oppression and brutalities had given birth to courageous patriots like Oliver Tambo, Walter Sisulu, Chief Luthulu, and many more. He shared that his people were his great wealth than the minerals and gems found in his country. He further remarked that he had learned the real meaning of courage and selflessness from such patriots. He had learned that courage was not the absence of fear but the triumph over it. Another observation that Mandela shared was the belief that hatred is not natural to men, it is acquired. If a man can learn to hate another because of the color of the skin, he can also be taught to love. Love, according to him, comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. He recounted the days of oppression that he had undergone during his long imprisonment as a freedom fighter. He shared that even at the most critical time, he saw a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards. This helps to keep alive his faith that man's goodness is a flame that can never be extinguished. Sharing another aspect of his experience regarding the obligations every individual has in his life. Here, obligations means duty. Mandela remarked that every individual has twin obligations, two obligations: personal obligation to his family and friends, and obligation to his community and country. Every man fulfills both these obligations according to his circumstances and abilities. But tragically, in his country, if any black colored man like him tried to fulfill these obligations, he was punished and isolated. Discharging duties to one's country, its people, and community was considered a crime by the authorities, and such a person was severed away from his surroundings. This was what had happened to him as well. As a child, he did not understand the meaning of freedom because he enjoyed life freely under the care of his parents. He later realized that this boyhood freedom was an illusion, and after going to Johannesburg, his attention was drawn to the fact that he, as well as his fellow beings, were not free. He then began to yearn for the basic and honorable freedom which he required to achieve his potential. He observed that this freedom had been curtailed for all those who were like him. It was at this stage that he joined the African National Congress, which drew him into the struggle for a general freedom for his countrymen. His desire to see his countrymen leading a free and dignified life in place of insubordination changed Mandela from a timid man into a bold one, and from a law abiding attorney into a criminal. He was isolated and rendered homeless. In the end, Mandela says that he considers both the oppressor and the oppressed to be prisoners. The oppressed is a prisoner because He undergoes physical torture and the oppressor because he is bound by hatred. He very rightly sums up by saying that the oppressed and the oppressor alike are robbed of their humanity.